The 7th of July 2023, you're very welcome back to Real True Education, Not Fake News, and the RTE mess. I've got a lot of compliments about my handling of the RTE thing, and particularly Val's Pictorial Weekly, making a skit of them and all of that. But I just want to go through what I know of the law and all of that. Now, this is a semi-state, but I think the same Companies Act and the same laws apply to the general practices and the way of doing auditing and accounting. And what we have in RTE is a revelation that there was either several barter accounts, a barter account where you barter, which were outside of the remit of the regulators and the inspectors and the auditors, and that these were split up into several different accounts. Now, I have done something which is very adventurous. They used to say, you know, if it quacks and it wobbles its tail and it has webbed feet, it goes quack, quack, and he has a wobbly tail and he has webbed feet, it's probably a duck. And we have looked at RTE, we see how they're so absolutely woke. We see the advertisements where they have all these coloured people, in other words, shoving this in your face that isn't representative of the total population. We see the whole absolute dedication to the American Democratic Party ideals, and this is collapsing all over the world. And we see that hatred of Trump, the president, that was there. And I maintain that Trump would have avoided a lot of death. But the thing about the woke and the cultural Marxist agenda, that it does have victims. It's hard to predict where they are. It may be the victims of a war. It could be kids killed in a school. There was probably the Ukraine war was avoidable with the proper thinking. But the woke crowd don't think. It's the same as the Ocean Gate tragedy. Engineering is put out. It's the same with the renewable energy tragedy too, environmental tragedy, where they actually do not comply with the law, EU law and SCH, Strategic Environmental Assessment, and they do not do the engineering analysis as to what this stuff is doing. So the fact that you can't use any wind energy without fossil fuel energy would be the first place you would think you would start. And this has just been driven on by the Greens and the Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael and Sinn Féin and all the rest of them without ever stopping to listen to any view. And I've been trying to get that view across on RTE, and it became apparent to me that there's something more than just green, woke, lovey-dovey stuff. There's something more at stake. And what is probably at stake is that there's big money flowing in. There could be one barter account with several things in it. You don't need, I mean, I have an account for my farm. I have the silage man, the contractors buying my fertilizer, my sprays. I put my money from the cattle in, I put my subsidies and grants in one side, and then I put the outgoings the other. An account doesn't have to have just one thing. So there was a bit of needle or a bit of aggro from some TD who said there was a lot of accounts, and then he said, well, it's the same thing if there's one or two, and we simply don't know. Well, what I can tell you, what I believe is the case is that this was brought up by a whistleblower. This was not uncovered by the internal or external auditors. Now, if you're an internal or an external auditor, you can contact me on below and I will talk to you. So I don't want to blacken anyone without knowing. But the fact of the matter is, as I understand it, this is going on, I'd say 12 years, but it's going on anyway, admittedly, 2019, 2020, 21 and 22. So if we take those years, why did the auditors not spot it? Why did the internal auditor not spot it? And why did the external auditor not spot this and report it? It could be that he was shown, and they were shown, a set of accounts. They were shown a set of accounts, their sure accounts, and they went through this. So they saw Tubridy paid a certain pay, yeah, that's all right, and there's the money come in there for the license fee, and we got that from advertising, yeah, that's all right. That could be all they saw. Well, if that's the case, the directors are responsible for producing all accounts. The auditor is entitled to ask for all financial accounts, and it is extremely bad and extremely unprofessional for them not to do so. And I'd say they did. I'd say they covered themselves and they did look for all the accounts. They're the external auditor. Now, the internal auditor should be aware of all accounts too. Was he or she, I don't know who it is, kept in the dark? They should be questioned. They're very important to be questioned. Because whatever happened last year, whatever was uncovered this year in 2003, has been happening before. And why was it not uncovered? And if it wasn't uncovered, was it the directors of RTE or the people in charge of giving the information to the auditors? And if they did not give the information to the auditors, then I believe you could easily have a crime under the Companies Act and the company law. You could have fraud. You could have all types of things. You can have false accounting. You can have a heap of things, because the company law has been tightened up quite a lot. And I studied it in my course a way back. And if the auditors are not told, and if there was a cover-up, even though they didn't benefit directly, but now it appears at least one staff member had a car for 5 years. So there was a benefit to them in kind. There was a fiduciary or financial incentive. Were they keeping this from the auditor? And if that's the case, if there's any evidence of that, the correct procedure for this committee of politicians, which I have no problem with for now, is to stop. Call in on Garda Síochána, the police force, accounting unit, the unit that deals with this fraud, and investigate it. That's what they need to do. And they will start off and they'll look at the whole books and they'll ask the auditor, what happened there? We were never shown. I didn't know about this account. Did you know there's an account there? 1.2 million or something. I would say the figure is 10 million. Based on the wind industry, based on Airgrid, based on other opportunist companies selling electric cars and all of this, all hyping in on the green thing. Oh, we're green, trying to flog a dead horse on this green stuff, which is not working. I would say there had to be fierce money pushed in. Presenters had to be given fierce money. I made a complaint about RTE's programme saying that wind energy was cheaper than fossil fuel energy, which it clearly isn't, because that's the law. They get the same price as the highest fuel, and it's not going well. It looks like it mightn't even succeed. So the point about it is they have the cover of the regulators. So the regulators need to be looked at, and that's why I make these complaints, folks. It's to cover myself, that if there's an inquiry, that I can say I made a complaint there. Just see how it was handled. And they'll begin to see that you could have these regulators in the dock. You could have these regulators answering questions too. But I go back to the point here. This should have been uncovered if they're paying auditors, if they pay an internal auditor and they pay an external auditor. Those auditors, if they go by the proper procedure and the law, if they go by that, and they weren't told about this, and there's no obvious way they could find it by doing the figures, then it's the directors that are withholding information, and that is a criminal offence. And so we'd say the director is John Henry Alfie McGourty Baxter. I'll never get sued on that, will I? John Henry Alfie McGourty Baxter. If that's the fella that had this information and was aware of this, or if there are more under him, the correct procedure is for the policeman with a witness present, and your man can have a solicitor and everything, to turn on the camera and say, now mister, why did you not tell the auditor? I caution you that you're not obliged to say anything unless you wish to do so, but anything you may say will be taken down in writing and may be given in evidence. He may well say, I wish to make no statement, in which case you interview the auditors, you interview the books, you get all the proofs necessary, and you bill your case and you issue your court prosecution. It's then up to the auditor, to the director to justify what he did and come out with the evidence. He might also offer to give his reasons. He might say, well, this was a procedure that was going on. This was to get extra advertising. We were getting very tough. We had to pay our presenters well. Well, then the question was, why were you paying them and not paying your staff during the the thing, the nappy on your face, the thing I'm talking about. I have to be very careful with the algorithm on YouTube. But the thing is, put them through that, and then go and interview everybody and compile an investigation file. The Garda or an inspector or somebody else sits down and makes out his report to the Director of Public Prosecutions. These are the facts. You let that go off. We, the public, will have to, if it's done that way, we have to wait. You have to wait a little while, and that's all right. And the Director of Public Prosecutions, who's meant to be independent, then makes a decision. And he did make a decision in respect of Portplanola, and he prosecuted a guy there for wrongdoing there. At this stage of the game, you see, they keep changing the law to make it tighter, and it should work. So that's the situation. Now, if there's a cover-up, that will be how they'll have to try and cover it up. And that will be how the TDs and senators will try to cover it up. They'll be ignorant of this. You wouldn't get one of them to understand anything about the laws that they make. They don't have a clue what laws they're making. They make laws on the examination of vehicles for the MOT test and the national car test. They don't have a clue what they're doing. They just take whatever some idiot or non-idiot tells them. Same with climate change. This is what I'm told. I'm going with this. You can't talk to them. No ordinary person can talk to them. And they're inundated with lobbyists. There's a city in Brussels in the EU dealing with lobbyists. They're inundated with this, and they listen to them. And of course, they're subject to corruption. So we have to watch all that. However, when the public eye is on them, they are in a bit of bother, and we'll soon see. Now, have I made it quite clear about that? If this, what we see coming out, is true, and all of this was going on, this, when it was brought to the attention of the government by a whistleblower. Now, if it's not a whistleblower, please post underneath. My understanding is somebody brought this to the attention of the authorities. It wasn't the auditor. But if it was the auditor, that's all right too. If it was the internal auditor, that's all right. If it was the external auditor, but that's okay. But if the auditor did the job right, then it's the directors. It's the people running RTE, the directors, who are responsible for informing the auditors correctly, and failure to do that is a criminal offence. And I want nothing short of full, rigorous investigation of the law. And as you shake the tree, the monkeys are up. You don't know what will fall out. And out of this investigation, somebody might get windy and produce other evidence of more and more barter accounts or branches of barter accounts. Or branches of barter accounts. This is public money. This is a public organisation. The government is entitled to know what's in there. Okay, and so the government themselves and the politicians will not want to be seen to be corrupt either. So the point is, there is a good opportunity. How possibly could the renewable energy industry? How could they not be buying off? We know they help politicians, but how could they not be buying off journalists? Michael Noonan, in this wind farm here, he wrote to Portplanola, interceding in the decision-making process. Michael Noonan, the ex-minister, I have his letter. So how can this happen without somebody somewhere being guilty of an offence? And that is the big question, and that is the thing to think about. This has gone on several years. What happens if you went back? Now, they said to go back 15 years. I'd be happy enough. That'll do. 15 years will do me. I'm not going to push it to owners. Do it for 15 years and do a good job. But where was the regulator, the auditors and all, for 2019, 2020, 2022, 2000, and then it's come up in 2023? Who actually blew the whistle? Why wasn't it blowing up before? And where are the criminal offences? And that is the key. And then when you see that this is what this type of an institution eventually leads to, they all lead to corruption. They're protected. And this of my comments here also applies to the other television and radio channels. Airgrid sponsors Shannonside Northern Sound. They do that openly. There's no check or balances to try and stop that. or to stop them having an influence on the programme content, right? So that's Shannon side, Northern and South. So how are they influencing South of Ireland radio stations? If EirGrid is not sponsoring a radio station in Kerry or in Wexford, how are they not? You think they're not going to? They spend all this money in Shannonside, where the pylons are going. So they spend all these millions sponsored in Shannonside. Yeah, the pylons are going here, and there's a lot of windmills for here. But what about Wexford and what about Cork? Are you telling me that they're not going to try and buy off anyone down there either? EirGrid had 13 million 5 years ago as a war chest for public opinion and public relations on its own. So I hope I've made that clear to you folks. Let's see what happens. I wouldn't hold my breath, but when these public crowd panic, they're liable to jump out of tree. They may do something a lot. And the problem too is, of course, even you jail a couple of people in RTE, the ones that come after them, the government are going to make sure the ones that come after them are equally as good or as bad. They'll do their bidding and they'll turn a blind eye again, and we'll go off sailing off into the wind, into the sunset, with regulators totally disinterested. Thumbs up, thumbs down. See you back for something else soon. Goodbye.